Hi, everyone. It's Edwin Rutsch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. And today I'm here with Ryan Laurie to talk about empathy. Welcome to the discussion.
Thank you.
Ryan.
I enjoy being here just to speak about this, especially having the conversation of empathy. So this is it's always something good to talk about.
Yeah, great. Well, maybe I can give a little bit of a background. You can add to it. You were once, here he says, you're a right-wing extremist with Rolling Wood Skins. It's a Michigan-based offshoot of the largest Nazi movement in the United States. And you had moved up the hierarchy too, became vice president, and you were you got arrested from doing some actions trying to raise money for the group, and through that being arrested, you kind of moved out of that extremist group. And so we want to talk about your experience, in that. And since you'd also talked about empathy as a way of bringing people out of extremists, we'll maybe explore that topic
definitely
too. So do you want to say more by way of introduction?
Well, I mean, that's my past. That is what happened to me. And I use my story. I think counter narratives and narrative storytelling is important, especially when combating extremism. Now I am a husband and father of 6 children. I live in Swartz Creek, which is about 8 miles outside of Flint, Michigan, where I was born and raised. We own our home. We're happy right now. We're trying our best. My wife works in the medical field, and because of that, she's able to support a lot of the work I do, and she just loves to see the changes that I've made in my life, and she loves seeing other people change as well. So here I am. I work as an interventionist for an organization called Light Upon Light, where we do many different skill sets are used to try to whether it's talk to an extremist one-on-one that's still involved in a group, somebody that's trying to get out, that called our 24/7 hotline, but empathy comes into that, and so it's very, very important conversation to have. And I'm just happy to be here, and that's kind of where I'm at now with my life.
Oh, great. Yeah. So, well, you had talked about reaching out to people who are in extremist groups with empathy, and you made a point of being empathic doesn't mean you agree with the person or sympathetic. Right. And I'm wondering, how did you kind of get to that sort of awareness of seeing the importance of empathy?
Well, that we can go back to the early years of debate, and humans in history have sometimes gone that line of what I'd say is our animalistic ways of going towards violence. But there's also those parts of history that we don't hear a lot about, and that's the people that were actually understanding of each other, had healthy debate, talked. One of the things that I had looked at, and I learned this from not just Daryl Davis, but several other people in the field, that if you come at somebody that's been in an extremist group, so if I was in the extremist group and somebody had came to me and immediately said that I was wrong and that I was basically an enemy, I would immediately shut my conversation down, and I would have walked out the door. I wouldn't have a conversation with you at all. We all are human beings. We all make mistakes. It took me a long time to realize that to not be judgmental, just to not be judgmental and just to listen to what people have to say, because everybody's story, and everybody has a story to tell, got them to where they are in life. So in order for me to understand that person and understand why they became an extremist, I need to be willing to be empathetic enough to listen to them, to understand them. When I say you don't have to be sympathetic, it means basically I don't have to be sympathetic to their cause, but it doesn't mean that I can't sit down and listen to you, because you are a human being and you have the right to do that. And in America, you have the freedom of speech, and you can express yourself any way you want to, as long as it doesn't harm another human being. And so learning that from a lot of different people, watching different empathetic examples. For instance, there was a right-wing extremist that believed that all Jews he was really into the anti-Zionist movement, and just believed that they were evil and trying to take over the world. And then after he had actually left, he was incarcerated for some time, a Jewish man gave him a job, offered him a job, gave him a place in life, showed him that his family was very loving, fed his family. And because of that empathy alone, it doesn't mean that the man was sympathetic for the things that he had done, but he gave him that empathy enough to say, look, you're a human being, you made mistakes, but I'm not judging you because of that. I'm here to help, and so I try to use that every day in the work that we do. um, is it a struggle for human beings to just sit down and have a conversation like that, trying to be fully empathetic? Yes. Every person that I sit down with, even if I'm completely empathetic with them, I sit down, I'm listening, I don't even say anything, I just let them get their whole story out. There's still those guys that sometimes just click the button and don't want anything to do with it. So not every case is a success case, but um, since I've been more empathetic in this world and tried to just only have that love space in my heart, it's been a lot easier with the interventions and the work that we do.
Well, that's what the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy is about, is to saying we need to raise the level of empathy in all of society. And the way that we overcome these polarizations, be it political, social polarizations, is to listen to all the parties and try to bring the parties together into a mutually empathic dialogue. And I'm hearing too that you're saying that the less we listen to someone, the less they're willing to engage and even get farther, perhaps extreme too. So it's really the listening and the dialogue that's going to bring people, together.
I worked a couple of projects that I actually put together myself here locally, where I had a member of the Black Lives Matter movement. I brought somebody that was more of a Trump supporter male and a Trump supporter female. I brought in a black and a white woman, and we all sat down at a table and just had conversation. And the conversation didn't completely start off political. We didn't go off into anything about extremism or, what side do you look at? We just talked about life things. We talked about what we were doing in our lives, who our family members were, what we did for work and all those kind of things. And it was funny, throughout that whole conversation, this is kind of how I started with a lot of people when I'm talking to extremists, because you start to understand that we have a lot more in common with each other than we do in differences. And that usually our differences is something that we're just, and Daryl says this a lot, we're just ignorant to. We've never been educated enough to understand. And so with that understanding, we fear it, And so I brought them together though, and it was a very good conversation. After having all those points of understanding, I started to slowly introduce some of the things about politics into it all. And because of that, it was a really, really healthy conversation at all. Nobody had ever really raised their voice. They stayed decently calm. There was a couple heated times of debate, but it wasn't something that you wouldn't see down on the House floor when they were having healthy debates. Right now, I don't know if we can say they are or not, but so yeah, there's a lot of different things that I've tested and used, and I love what you guys do, and I would love to join some of the circles and the different things that you've been putting together. So I watched a couple videos. One was about a half hour long that my wife actually got to listen to too before she went into work one day. So yeah. Definitely.
Oh, great. Yeah. So it's like you're saying that you were bringing people together, and you started the conversation about more personal issues like family, which is always good. People all have sort of family issues, and they can really relate to that. And then once you have that sort of connection and understanding, the more difficult, challenging topics, maybe politics, are sort of easier to not get upset, or we have, continue that. So that's what we do with, with the empathy circle process. So what we do is it's sort of a structured dialogue process where we have small groups to kind of support that. Sometimes you bring people together and it just blows up, right? I mean, you can imagine just blowing up. People start getting heated, they get triggered, they get upset, and then it kind of escalates. And how do you kind of hold that? And what we do is this empathy circle process, where one person, have small group, maybe 4 or 5 people, one person speaks and they select who they're going to speak to, and they speak on the topic, whatever the topic is. But the listener has to reflect back their understanding of what the speaker has said to the speaker's satisfaction. Okay. And, they speak and they share, they get a reflection, they speak and we have also time limits. So you have like 5 minutes, 6-minute time limits. And it's sort of the core of mediation. If you've ever done it, if you do mediation type work, if you can get the parties to kind of hear each other and acknowledge, the other person, that it's sort of the gateway to constructive dialogue.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love it. And the fact that it's working too, there's so many different approaches to it all, but I want to take part in this for sure. So
Oh, great. Well, we're glad to, do something together, bring those parties together, the Black Lives Matter, any sort of
yeah.
people on the right, the extremists. We had gone to some, with the empathy tent, I don't know, I think I sent you that about the empathy tent. We actually go into public where
Mhm.
these conflicts, the left and right are sort of battling it out on the streets. And we've been to right-wing rallies as well with the tent and just offer to listen to parties there. And I remember we went to Sacramento. There was a right-wing rally, Unite the Right, I think it was.
Mm.
And we had 5 members from the Identity Europa group come into the empathy tent, and we actually were doing empathy circles with them.
Nice.
And so I think that's what I really see, like you, that's why I was so interested in talking to you, because you've got that real world experience, that the way to really bridge these divides is not to attack each other,
Right.
say you're wrong, I'm anti whatever you're doing, that I'm here to listen and understand you. And,
Mhm.
how do we get that message out? Because the majority of people just think we have to be against the other
Right.
side. And it's
And
like,
I think a lot of that comes from just mainstream, the media, Hollywood, different things really add to it. And I'm not going to say all media, because media is good. We need it. We need the news. But I think a lot of just what's pressed is they know what's a good headline, a catchy headline, a negative headline. And most people today, our attention span lasts for about 20 to 30 seconds. And that's why, like things like apps like TikTok are famous, because they're, it's a very short video. You watch it, you move on to the next video. Uh, I think it's that same way with keeping somebody's attention and talking to them about things. And I really think that the media mainstream has just found a good way of keeping us divided. As funny as that, I was on the far right, and eventually met some friends that were really on the far left. And I mean, they wouldn't even consider themselves Antifa. Whether anti-fascist or not, they would consider themselves, almost communist party. And it's funny that you see the similarities of how close they are in similarity on the far left as they are on the far right. And I think seeing that and knowing these different people really allowed me to help try to bring a lot of them together. And it does that's not always successful. The
mhm.
extreme left and the extreme right, it's very, very hard to get them to sit down and have a conversation together. It's probably been some of the toughest battles, because a lot of them feel like war and violence has been the answer in the past. People bring up Lenin and the Russian Revolution, or they talk about our revolution here in America. It's stuff that most of the people, honestly, when they're even talking about the stuff, they haven't been educated on it. And so it's just to spit something off the mouth to be mad at the other person. But I have witnessed people from either side willing to sit down and have a conversation and kind of just mediate it. And um, as long as the right questions are asked sometimes, and directed the right way, and one of the things I try to keep people from doing is accusing,
Mhm.
because you have to try to get an understanding of why they even feel the way they do. And if by accusations and things like that, it never works. So I mean, what I do love about this field and what we do is that I get to meet people all the time from different facets of life, and different religions, and different races. It doesn't matter. I mean, everybody in this field, and and to hear their stories, their
Mhm.
personal narratives, and how close. I mean, a lot of those people have been to me. I grew up in a middle class working family. Most my grandparents worked at General Motors. Struggled, but made it. Made the ends meet at the time. And growing up in a city like Flint, Michigan, where it was recession after recession after recession.
Mm.
But you just start to see that a lot of these things that drew people towards extremism in the first place, whether it be the left or right, has a lot to do with something economically not being taken care of in their lives, or just rumors that are spread throughout a rural area that aren't necessarily spread through a suburban or a urban area.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, I love it. And I think that empathy, love and understanding, I say it all the time, to have love and understanding for each other, no matter what your difference is, and that's hard for some people because some people have committed some crimes that it's hard to forgive somebody for, in their hearts. But well, I can't think of her name right now because she works with us, and it's just not coming to my. Her father was killed by a white supremacist. He was a musician. He was getting ready to get real to go real big, and she actually went to prison and she forgave him, and she has conversations with them through letters and different things like that. And she said that forgiving in her heart wasn't necessarily for him,
Mhm.
but for her own weight, to release that own weight and hate that she was holding on to, because in order for her to heal and to have a better understanding of why this ever happened, she had to forgive him, and so um, stories like that is what keeps me going every day,
Mhm.
realizing that this does work. And um, we're humans, we're born to love, we're not born to hate, so the first thing we try is what we're born with. Let's work on love. So
I saw that on your Facebook page. You have a quote on love there. Can't
yeah,
remember the
that's Khalil Gibran.
Mhm.
And I love his work. My wife just surprised me with a book that has all of his works in one. I'm reading Madman right now, which is kind of a short um, version of his writings, because The Prophet was very long. It was the first thing I ever had read. And yeah, I mean, he speaks a lot about love. And he was, I think, in my, well, he may have been a Christian to some extent. I think he was more of an omnibus, so he was open to all religions, and trying to find the good in everything. There's a good in everything and every person, and we've got to try to find out what that good is instead of immediately going to the things that we think are negative about the person. So
Yeah, well, I've said that the empathy circle is microdosing love,
right,
because if you just before responding to someone, right, what they share is you just listen to them, make sure that they feel like they've been heard and understood. There's a little bit of love in that, and I think that's what if you just deepen that, you're sort of deepening that. So
right,
the empathy is sort of this gateway for love.
yeah, it is. And listening is important, and that took me some training to go to and do some things, because you think, well, I've listened to this person. What do you mean? I mean, they took some notes, but you're not always constantly, like, you're not actually listening to what that person has to say sometimes. And I say that as we have our own feelings, our own aspirations, things that we're doing in our own life. So a lot of people try to pull out what it is that's going to help them out, from this person's speech. And what you're supposed to be taking from that person isn't necessarily there to help you out. You're just there to hear that person and to listen to them completely. And so I think a lot of times when I go in to listen to somebody, I try to turn everything else off. It's hard,
Mhm.
especially having 6 kids, but just realize that right now that person deserves my undivided attention. And so let me try to forget a lot of these other things that are going on. And that's why a lot of times when I meet with people, if they will meet in person, I'll try to go out to somewhere in the nature. We try to get away from where the normal human interactions are going on all over the place. Sometimes people on the far right, and extremists especially, they feel safer doing something like that, rather than being in public. Some of them want to meet in a public space. So um, Daryl Davis has used that method too, where he meets people in hotel rooms. It's just quiet, it's a space, it's just them two, and you can really listen to that person and hear what they have to say. So
So how does that work with your organization? You're going and reaching out, or you're like, we're here, we're
so
available,
we
you can call us, or we'll
yep,
meet with you. What's the process?
we have a 24/7 hotline that you can call. Let's say it's a family member that has a concern that their son or daughter or nephew, niece, whatever, maybe your husband, wife, are joining a extremist group. And it's not always just white right wing extremism. It's jihadism. We deal with a lot of different extremisms, and um, we work with a lot of different intelligence groups. So FBI, Department of Homeland Security, CIA, with State Department, a lot of different groups that will look at somebody and say, okay, they're a threat, but we don't think they're a threat to society where they're going to go out and do something. We've kept an eye on them for some time, but maybe this person can be de-radicalized. Maybe they could make a change. There's this opening there, and so we'll find out who that person is a lot of times, and or they've been arrested. And so incarceration is some of that, is that it's a very important time to try to fly into when they do get incarcerated, because you can quickly de-radicalize somebody once they've separated themselves from that group. And then we'll start a conversation with them. Sometimes we'll try to find out their email. We like I said the other day in the call we had with Common Ground, and there's a podcast that'll be coming out here in about 2 weeks too, that we had a long conversation on this, is sometimes it feels like you're stalking their pages, the different things they're doing on social media. But it's because I'm trying to learn who this person is, get to know who they are, know what their life is, because they're not always, some, yes, majority post just a lot of just real extremist type um, stuff they've expressed, but there is family stuff in there. People do have their normal lives and what's going on, and so you'll see those stresses. And so we find out what we think is the best way to come in and actually speak to the person, whether it's meeting them inside a county jail or prison if they're willing to talk to us, or meeting them just out in public and just saying, hey, this is who I am. I'd like to have a conversation, just to sit down with you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to try to get you, to self-incriminate yourself. So I'm not wanting you to tell me stories of things you've done or anything like that. I just would like to have a conversation with you. And it doesn't always work. The cases that usually work a lot more are the people that have reached out to us because they've seen, for instance, we have some escape hate videos. I don't know if you ever saw any of those, where we kind of give a small short narrative of our own story, why we walked away from hate, where we grew up at, things that we, had did. And then at the end of the video, it says, it's basically us finishing off with, like, you don't have to be part of this life. Like, no matter what they are telling you, if you're in a cult, if, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be you, you can escape it. And it's surprisingly, we get calls and we get emails and people trying to reach out just to, hey, look, I've been in this group for some time. My dad brought me into it, my uncle, something like that. Or, I just got into it myself. I graduated from high school, and so many different stories. But it's the process can be very difficult at times, partly because there is no funding for it. And I'm not in it for the money. I don't, my wife worked, like I said, in the medical field, so I'm not out here trying to raise funds all the time. But one of the things I do bring up is that if this could be a job, if organizations that do this, and there's very few organizations that do this kind of work, if they could get the type of resources that are needed from the government, then we could probably make this work a lot better when it comes to the fight and combating extremism. I think that we failed the war on terrorism when it comes to the Middle East. I think it's a religious war that no matter what will always continuously be fought, but nothing has ever been healed by continuously dropping bombs and missiles and destroying civilization, and if you look at Damascus and other places like that, I mean, they're gone, those places are gone. And so we need to find new ways of doing that. And it's been proven that formers like myself, people like Daryl Davis, and people that do this intervention work, like Jesse Morton. I'm not familiar if you're familiar with Jesse Morton or not. Jesse Morton was, and he's who started Light Upon Light and Parallel Networks. He was a jihadist extremist. He actually, anybody remembers the story, South Park creators had put an episode out where they talked about jihadism, they talked about Allah, and made a lot of different comments that were really anti-Muslim. And Jesse was basically a recruiter at the time for these jihadist groups, and was speaking to some of the highest commanders within ISIS and groups like that. And he threatened to kill, or was working on a plan to kill the creators of South Park. He left the country, and he tells the story a lot better than I do, but he left the country, tried to go to Morocco, and was picked up. One of the things that he said changed him almost immediately was that he thought that he was going to get this, bag thrown over top of his head. He was going to wake up in Guantanamo or somewhere, like that. But instead they didn't. They treated him like a human being. He said it was the first time that he had ever, saw what he believed the American imperialists to like treat somebody with respect and just want to hear their story. And because of that, Jesse eventually started working for the FBI. He stopped, I don't even know the exact number of terrorist attacks from happening, by basically infiltrating these same groups that he had been part of before. And then eventually started to do more empathetic work. He thought that, that type of war, us bringing these people down that way, people did die, things happen. And that there was a better way of us trying to do this in society. And the only way that we were going to do that was by finding that power of love. And he's got a really, really good method on it. It's called Control Alt Delete Hate. You can actually look it up on, I think it's lightuponlight.com. It might be, I'll have to figure out exactly what the website is so I can give it to you before we get off of here. But great work. And I've learned so much from him. He's been a huge mentor to me. And he's really respected across not just the intelligence fields, but with intervention work, psychologists, psychiatrists. Many of my research projects that I've been part of with Harvard and Boston University and groups like that, he got me involved with, and so definitely check him out. And I'm sure that he would love to have a conversation with you too in the future about
Yeah,
empathy.
definitely.
He works close with me and Daryl. So
yeah, so I had heard that in your panel discussion too. You brought up the funding part of it, and I see that as well. It's like there's a lot of sort of anti-work, working against, but there's not a lot of support for an empathic approach.
right.
Even though Barack Obama, when he ran for office, he talked endlessly about the importance of empathy, and Joe Biden has talked about empathy a lot. He just did a recent he gave a talk at the on Memorial Day. He said empathy is the foundation of democracy. So it's
right.
But there's not a lot of funding. It seems like people there's sort of that mindset of listening and engaging is somehow not really.
The policy has just never
funded.
ever really been there to support work like ours. And because of that, I think it's a lot of the reason why there's just been no money for like the CVE side of what we do, the soft side of counterterrorism. And what I will say is under the Biden administration, there has been some changes. They didn't happen quickly, but I mean, he hasn't been in office that long yet, dealing with a lot of other issues too. But one of the most important things we've had to deal with right now and face that is our country. We have domestic extremism, and it's growing fast. And it's not just jihadism that we have to fear or worry about in this country. We have our own homegrown terrorists right here in our backyard. And so just recently they came out with a new report on what they kind of consider domestic extremism, whether it goes from an environmental terrorist to, and it can get a little touchy in there too, because there's things that I feel like we don't want to step on people's civil liberties either. And just because somebody has a different opinion than you have, let's hope that they don't use that against that person and just call them a domestic extremist, if we do get the wrong person in office. But to see those kind of changes, that it makes me a little bit more hopeful that policy will change to protect people that do the work that we do. And then because of that, maybe some funding. I know that, and I could be wrong exactly on the number, but about $23 million in grants are going to go out to organizations that put in through like Department of Homeland Security and things like that to try different research projects or things that they've been working on. Jesse's been hard at work on writing proposals to try to get some of that money, but it's difficult, and you can't do the regular work that you do every day if you're sitting down. If anybody's ever wrote a proposal before or knows how a business plan goes or any of that, it takes a long time. It is. And so I'm hopeful, and I think I have to be that way. We have to be hopeful that this administration does do something before another administration comes in and just pushes it down the road further. But I think where we're going in our country right now, I don't think extremism is going to allow somebody to kick the can down the road any further. I think we've got to that boiling point in some areas. You see a lot in Portland, where both sides just are not willing to sit down and have that conversation, and things have to be done. But
it's sort of the what I would call the empathy movement. Like we go to like Berkeley, it would be the right wing would come demonstrate for free speech. you'd have Antifa, counter demonstrating, and there'd be maybe 5 of us in the empathy tent trying to.
Right.
So that's all. It's like you'd have like 200 or 300 on each side, and the amount of support for sort of an empathic approach is about, like less than 1%. So
Right.
there's something in the culture that seems to be missing. And I think that's what we're trying to, advocate for is. In fact, I've been thinking of in the sense of, there's this hate, like, we're against hate, but in a sense, we want to empathize with hate. So empathizing with hate is a way that it's transformed. If you hate, it's like you're just creating more hate, right? And if you
Right.
empathize with hate, it's transformative. And it's like, oh, I'm not being, and Daryl Davis, you hear all of his stories. It's the same thing. He's out there listening, empathizing with people that with the KKK or whatever, and it's that connection that actually transforms people. And the more you kind of go against hate or against racism or against Nazism or whatever, the more you kind of feed it.
Yeah, he actually says that. Gosh, I don't know if it's on the Light Upon Light website. He actually talks about this. So there's a group of people we all call shapeshifters, and we're all in this field doing different work in different places. And Daryl has a short video where he talks about not liking to call things like against something. To label it that way, you immediately are putting this wall up in between the groups. And so I think he looks at it from a pro-humanity approach is what he calls it. And that's where we're all humans and we all deserve to be loved, and we all want a lot of those same things in life. And so that using that approach has worked well for him. I mean, to be a Black man, to go into KKK rallies or be invited to one of these leaders' homes, and for them to not harm him and just to listen to what he has to say, empathy has to be proving itself that it can work, no matter what circumstances you're in. So it's really important. And if the president's using it in a speech, it's because somebody's telling him that it's definitely worked. But I've seen Biden, a lot of people want to say that he's a touchy type person. I just think that he's a huggy type person. There's a lot of people that we just love somebody and you want to give them a hug, and I think that can be misinterpreted because mainstream wants to make it seem like you must just be a weirdo. I coming from Flint, Michigan here, I could go down the road today and wave to somebody, and to be honest with you, half the time you almost expect the person to flip you off, and you're like, why did they just do that? I was just waving, like I was literally being a nice person. And it's because they don't hear everybody's at each other's necks all the time, at each other's throats. And I went down south recently on a vacation with my wife, and we were in Virginia Beach, and everybody was waving and talking and, hey, how you doing? And I was able to have more conversations there than I can even when I come back home with people. And I think that's important, just to be that like opening, nice person, no matter who that person is that you're meeting, and shake their hand and treat them like a human being is so important. And
it's less stressful. You feel better, feel warmer, less stress, live longer. Yeah. And have that open attitude. I just wanted to show you this, just want to get your reaction. I got to kind of share, this is something I've been playing with. So, talking about empathy, I was just playing with this, that racism is not empathy. So if we are, what racism is judging people, which blocks empathy. But judging people for being racist, being anti-racist is not empathy either. And I'm saying that empathy is equal to empathy. Empathy doesn't mean that you agree with the person. It doesn't mean that you disagree with them. It doesn't mean that you sympathize with them. It's not judgment. What it is deep listening. And it's also bringing people into a mutual empathy. And that's what I'm calling a culture of empathy. So what happens a lot is people think from an individualistic term, like, oh, I have to be individualistically empathizing, and it doesn't come back, right? What we really need to think is in terms of the relationship, that if, when I reach out to the left, right, I'm empathizing with the intention of making it a mutual. It's like, we have to listen first. There's this aspect of, to get the ball rolling, to prime the pump, I have to be willing to listen. and then I try to listen to model it, and then try to bring the parties together to listen to each other and to listen to me, so that we're really talking about mutuality of
Yeah.
listening. So,
And that's really how you can show the similarities in all of our lives. And like Daryl says all the time, is that how can you hate me if you don't know me? And it's really, honestly, it's it's that deep listening, letting go of all the things that you've had, judgments, any of those things, and just opening your brain and your heart to that person, to that, hey, let's work on doing something peaceful. Martin Luther King had even said that, you cannot combat violence with violence. It never works. It just creates more violence. And if we want to have a society that's, peaceful, and understanding with each other, then we can't continue to keep doing that with violence. It has to be, empathy and love, and just that mutual understanding. So I love that. I love that model too. That was great.
yeah, so it's I think there's another thing I've been looking at is we need to get the politicians to start modeling empathy between each other. With our empathy tent, I'm thinking of setting it up in the Capitol Mall and say,
Yeah.
we demand that you listen to each other and take part in empathy circles. We're not leaving here until you sit down
Right.
and model it. I mean, there's no reason that the Democrats, couple of Republicans couldn't sit down and model these dialogues with each
Common
other.
Ground has done that too. I don't try to cut you off or anything. Common
No, sure.
Ground, and I'm sure if you watched me and Daryl's program, then you probably have seen some of the other Common Ground. But one of the things I like about their organization and being a 501c3 is that they will bring people from opposite sides to speak about an issue, and show people that they can, work on some things. There is bipartisanship here, and some type of mutual, or I mean, obviously they have some type of empathy for each other to even sit down and have those conversations. But that would be great. Do I think that we would get a lot of politicians in there to do it? I don't know. I guess you can't, you don't know until you try. That's one of the hardest things right now, I think, with this, is that all we hear in the news anymore or anywhere else when you go out into public is, whether it's what's going on with Trump, or what's going on with Rudy Giuliani right now, or what's going on with, the extreme left wanting to be communists, and having that constantly thrown down people's throats. And if they haven't had the right type of education, it's very easy to believe the conspiracy theories and, everything else going on in the world today. And it is very important. If you're elected to office, you're supposed to, stand by a certain standard, that you're there to lead, you're here to help and bring people together and unite. Because being a politician doesn't mean that you're just, helping or serving Democrats. It doesn't mean that you're just serving Republicans. You're serving your whole community. No matter where you live, there's going to be somebody that has a difference of opinion. And so I think politicians, first and foremost, need to show the world that they are able to do those kind of things. It's kind of that real deep polarization, I think, and the reason why we have it in this country now is because of just where we've, kind of got with politics. There's a lot of people that debate and say, well, it's because we're mostly a two-party system. So the two parties are just always going to constantly just be back and forth about things, and eventually it boils over in any democracy, But I have a feeling that, you got to find that good in everybody. And I think that's important for us all to do. It was important for me to be able to go through my transition and my healing process, was to forgive a lot of people in my life that I never ever thought I could forgive. And to realize that by forgiving them and doing that, I release so much weight off my shoulders. And to not wake up today and go, gosh, I'm so mad about what's going on in politics today, because the bigger picture is most of us don't have any control over that. We're here to just try to do that little bit of good we can do to hopefully create that. Was it JFK? JFK said the ripple, or is it his brother? I can't remember who said, you create the ripple and the ripple goes out, and hopefully we can be that change that creates that ripple, and
create that empathic ripple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, my congressman, Mark DeSaulnier here in Contra Costa, said he's Democrat, and he'd be willing to do an empathy circle with Republican Congress members. So I've got the first one. I'm trying to look at, if you know any Republican congressional representatives that would take part.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Masood Akhtar, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's out of Wisconsin. I sit on one of his honorary boards, and We Are United Against Hate is the name of his organization. And he's trying to create a board between Michigan and Wisconsin right now, because I'm in Michigan, he's in Wisconsin, and try to make it a bipartisan board. So have people from the left and the right, Republican and Democrat on this board, and really try to come up with those empathetic ideas that what can we do to really end the polarization and work together as a community and come up with solutions, that we think will work. And surprisingly, we've had people on the right and the left that are willing to sit on these boards and
representatives.
Yes, we have
Mhm.
representatives that are right here in the state of Michigan, which is crazy because in Michigan, in Wisconsin's very similar to where they're, House and Senate are mostly controlled by Republicans with I think it's a Democratic governor they have there. And then we have a Democratic governor, attorney general, secretary of state. And then the House and the Senate are controlled by Republicans. And so there's always that real deep pocketed polarization. One of the reasons why you've seen a lot of extremist groups come out of the state of Michigan here recently. I don't know if you're familiar with the attacks or the attempted attacks on our governor here.
Oh yeah.
So there's an extremist group, the Wolverine group that was here that was planning on doing several different types of attacks to try to make it seem as though the left was doing it, so they could create some type of race war or whatever it was that their complete intentions were. I don't think anybody knows yet, but we know what they wanted to do to the politicians. And so but yeah, we've been able to actually surprisingly in these two states bring people together from both sides, and we'll see what solutions we come up with, and hopefully it's something that we can model behind and use around the whole country and try to work in there. But I think there's a lot of politicians that we have in office right now in some of the larger seats that it's a money thing, it's the people that are paying them, it's where they're getting their self-interest from that keeps driving that hate and deep polarization. And until we start getting real people into office, and I say real people that care and just have a general understanding and care for their community no matter what, it's going to be a long time before I think politics completely gets to, I don't know if politics is ever really healthy, but
so
somewhere where we can have
it's
that
going to be
mutual
tough to get some politicians. So you're
right.
seeing it as more of a long-term
It
issue.
is. And talking about, just any politician that comes out and says, oh, maybe violence is needed. Well, you just immediately are just ruining your own country. And anybody that's ever saw war knows that it's not, there's nothing pretty about it. There's nothing good in any of it. And this country's had to face that. We've had that. Now, people today, do we know what that feels like to have a civil war in our country? No. We read our history books, but to really realize how many people lost their lives during that civil war, and what it would be to just even lose one human being. There's no cost on a human life, and so I think that's why our work and the work you do is so important today.
One of the motivations for me is my family, both parents were German in the eastern part of Germany during World War II. They were just kids, but they went, family members were just shot,
right.
The rapes. And so that's sort of one of the motivations. I know from my stories, growing up, I've heard what the possibilities are, and it's been direct. And that's, what we need to head off is to keep that from happening. It happens like in Syria and so many countries in the world. And, we're not immune. No place really is immune from that. And if we don't put in the time and energy and the resources and the commitment and some, practices that, anything can happen.
Yep.
And that's also why I kind of harp on the empathy circle process, because, I've been working on this topic of empathy for maybe about 13, 14 years. And I found that the empathy circle is a practice, is a foundational, simple practice, is kind of the most effective gateway practice that is bringing people in. And it's something that anyone can learn quite quickly. So, and that you can learn it, you can do it with your family. So you can have family empathy circles. And, there's always family conflicts, and, it's core to like family mediation, partners, divorce, etc. If you can, basic, family counseling is bring the, having the parties listen to
Yeah.
each other, and this is kind of core to that. So it's totally transferable. When we take the empathy tent out, we went to one rally, and there was a woman who was a liberal from Berkeley. She says, "Oh, I never get to talk to conservatives." And I said, and we had just been having a dialogue with some conservative women. And I said,
Right.
"Well, they're right here. Let's have an empathy circle." They started talking. We share how to do the process. The topic came up about gun violence. It was after the shooting in Texas. There was a church, I think, if you remember that shooting. There was quite a few people were killed, and the conservative women had some actually relatives that were kind of related to that. And so they started talking about, the gun violence, and they actually found a lot of commonality. But one person would say something, and you could see it would sort of trigger the other person. They'd want to respond right away. I'd say, no, wait a minute. You'll get your chance to respond.
Yeah.
You'll have your turn. We want to hear what you have to say. But first, reflect back what you heard this other person say to their satisfaction. Then you'll have your turn. And then they would do it. And at the end, it was big hugs. They just had this hug. They were like, it's just that common humanity. They kind of see it. If we have some sort of practice, some tools for, and it's people that can help facilitate, and ideally you start learning it. You need maybe to begin with some facilitation, but then people learn the skills and they can start facilitating their own dialogues in their own circles, in their own families and communities.
Right. It could be used anywhere. I mean, even in school, there's so many different places that I think this is. I graduated actually from a boys' school in Pennsylvania, and we would have group circles like that every single week where you got to sit down with a certain group of people, and each person got their own time to say how they felt about something. And there might have been somebody in that room that you're really having a lot of issues with, and you had every right to speak out at that time and say how your feelings were and why you felt the way you did. And then they had the chance to come back and say, and a lot of times it ended in hugs, ended in a shaking of hands, and nobody, turned towards the violent side of it all. And I think that's important for all of us. In our family, we have family circles all the time here, because with 6 kids, there's all kinds of differences. And I don't push my political views or, what I do onto them. My kids know what I do for work, and I think they watch some of the videos and do different things on their own. And a couple of my daughters that we have from a separate marriage, their political views are completely different from mine. It's a whole different type of side. And but I think by giving my kids and showing them what empathy is and why it's so important, they've been able to kind of mold themselves into a healthy way of looking at politics, I think, in life, and so I hope they continue to take that into the world. And so far so good. I've had
It's important. People, I'm sorry, that
No, you're good.
you can have your own voice, that every voice matters. It's not that, hey, you can't think these things, you can't say these things, that you will be heard to your satisfaction no matter what it is. But be willing to listen to the other person too, for whatever is real for them. And I've done like these empathy circles with my nephews and nieces. I don't have any children, but they're like 5 years old and 6 years old. They get into a conflict, and then I do empathic listening with one, I do it with the other, go back and forth, and then bring them into, okay, now what did you hear the other person say? And they go back and forth. And my niece, usually they're all fighting. She's the youngest, so she gets beat up most by her older brothers. And it's like, she just loves it. It's like, oh, I'm being heard. I don't get beat up, and my voice gets heard here too. And they actually come up with some kind of strategies of resolving the conflict. And she will say, I remember she said, I like empathy circles. Let's do it again. Because it just feels good to kind of be heard and kind of yeah.
It's definitely something that it's the core of my work. If I wasn't empathetic, I would fail half the projects and cases that we're dealing with. It's like I've said, Daryl said many times, we don't not every single case is successful. Not each person wants to change their ways. But I can tell you that a majority of the time, just by listening, and like I said, not always starting that conversation right off with something that is going to be a heated debate. Try to find those things that you have in common, and similarities that you have, and find out what it is that makes you happy in life, because so many of those things are so um, similar to each other. We all want the same things a lot of times when you look at it.
Yeah.
And really, honestly, it's just educating. Doing these empathy circles, we educate. We show people that it can work, and I think that educating can get rid of a lot of that ignorance, and just being understanding. And so, yeah, I mean, it's any work that's work on empathy, and just treating a person, like Daryl says, pro-human, and realizing that we've all made mistakes. Not one of us is a perfect stamped out person.
Yeah.
Even for the smallest mistake to the largest mistake, we're humans. We make mistakes, and getting that understanding and knowing that, I think is a lot easier for you to be non-judgmental and just loving. And
Yeah. Let
loving
go,
person.
let go of the self-righteousness. It's like none
Yeah.
of us are righteous. It's like
Have you ever
you're
taken self-interest type training at all, or
no.
any type of?
Mm-mm.
So self-interest groups, I really like them. I really do. And a lot of times, what they want to do is they're trying to find out, what is your self-interest? Are you in this movement for the right reason? Or are you doing this for the right reason? And it really tests you. They've got week longs, they've got some that are just, a day long type thing. But it really makes you dig deeper to say, am I doing enough? Do I feel like I'm doing enough? Have I really pushed myself to be the better person today that can do more for society? Or am I in it because I'm trying to build a career and I want money, or something else, that you realize that your self-interest isn't always good.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to let go of some of those things and really realize, what can I do to maybe give up an arm to help out something, if it's going to help society in a good way. And so a lot of that self-interest training I've taken, and it's great. It's
Mm-hmm.
Michigan United is an
Mm.
organization here in the state. They work with People's Action nationally, and a lot of environmental groups and stuff that are part of that. And they do a lot of that self-interest, motivational type training and they really go into narration, and telling your story.
Mm-hmm.
To really work on talking to like a group or a crowd full of people, if you want to continue to keep their attention, and get them to understand you, you got to have a good telling story.
Mm-hmm.
So
So this
yeah,
helps you
yeah,
tap into your motivations and turn that motivation into a story that you can convey to
yeah,
others.
yeah.
And oh,
I
cool.
saw a lady today, which is something I never really thought of. And I'm sure, I mean, it's been thought of, because intelligence groups have done this a lot to try to infiltrate groups, but is even creating, in some ways, a fictional narrative for um, for extremists when you're trying to pull them out and things like that. And I don't necessarily like that method, because I feel like it's faking the funk. But if somebody can tell this story that is going to be so interesting that you're keeping those people on you and they're listening to you, and because of that story you're able to make this inspirational change, then I mean, try it by all means. Let's see if fictional narratives work. But I think we have enough people in this country, in this world overall, that have good enough stories to where we don't need to make fictional stories. Let the people that have been there before, have walked in those
Mm-hmm.
steps, have been violent, have, like I said in the program the other day, the best cop usually is the best criminal. It goes hand in hand a lot of times. And those people that have been, on that side of extremism before, they know how the inside works. They know how people work on that side, and the things that they want, and what their goals are usually are. And so I think it's really, really important that we don't give up on those people.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Cornell West said it. We cannot give up on formers. We have to give our attention to them, and forgive, and then learn. What can we learn from them? Because each person you can learn something from. Is and I'll end with this. With me is, what I can't remember who it was that said it, but they said that basically, if you ever call yourself wise, you're not wise at all.
Mm-hmm.
You're always learning. It's something I try to take into life every single
Mm-hmm.
day, is that I can learn something from every single person I meet. So
Oh, right. So what's next for you with the learning and
Well,
your work, and where are you
I'm
going?
constantly educating myself because things are always changing. So I read a lot of books. But right now I'm working on a few, hopefully programs that we're going to be able to kind of do with DEI and different things here in the state of Michigan, on a local level. And we'll see where those kind of go right now. I'm really, really hoping they can be projects that take off and maybe we can make some changes. Um, a lot of my work deals with light upon light. It is hard right now, like I said, with the funding. It's hard to constantly be doing interventions, because to have the resource and the staff that has to be there to answer the phones, they have to monitor, computers and social media sites and, what's being talked about. It's hard to have people to do that if it's volunteer. I mean,
Hmm.
if, 501c3s to have volunteers, you'll get great volunteers, but the work isn't necessarily always where you want it. And
Hmm.
um, it's just, it's not, there's no incentive there for some people, and so they just won't help. But I think if we had that within our organization and in other organizations that I've seen, if they had the right type of resources and funding, they could do a lot more work, and so that's one of the things that I've really been trying to do is put the pressure
Hmm.
onto this administration right now. And I know other institutes that are, the Institute of Peace and other ones that are actually trying to really make this policy change now while we can to, um, hopefully bring about, an empathetic way
Hmm.
of dealing with combating extremism. I hate even using the word combating extremism because that
Yeah,
immediately makes you think
empathizing
about,
with, I say it is empathizing with racism, empathizing with hate, empathizing, because
right. You got to
people
explain
think
that to
it,
people.
yeah, you got to explain it, but I'm thinking of
Yeah.
actually doing some, you know, podcasts like empathizing with racism to make it an issue, that to explain it, because people think, oh, you're supporting it, you're sympathizing, which you've been trying to
No.
address, that it's not, it's actually transformative. If
Yeah.
empathizing with racism is transformative.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's given that different, everybody like, um Daryl, and I've learned so much of this with our perception of reality. And what we perceive to be reality is that person's reality. But if I can listen to them and understand why their reality is where it is, then I can hopefully put something in there that can maybe change their perception differently, in a good way, transformative way. And so that's always important with everything we do, is just understand that we all look at things, from a different scope. Our realities are all different because we have different things going on in our lives and we've been molded by different people. And it's
and
just,
it's
it's an
connecting.
important word. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
it's
It really is.
connecting, just to hear someone, to feel, they feel there's a sense of connection there, and
Yep.
that it feels pretty good, feels damn good, like Carl Rogers says about empathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Connection feels damn good. So is there any, like, I've been really focusing on the empathy circle. I don't know if you'd be up for doing some empathy circles. Because I see this, our goal is this one practice is a first step gateway practice, because it's very reproducible. It's easy to learn,
Mhm.
to just spread it as widely as possible. Like, our goal is like, just teach every person in the world how to take part in an empathy circle and to be able to facilitate one. And just that first step, there's a lot of other steps that can be added to it,
Right.
but this is like a first minimal viable sort of a practice that's very reproducible. So I don't know if you'd be up for, if you know of anyone that, if it's the Black Lives Matter and other sides or
Yeah. No,
whatever,
I know
and we can. Mhm.
a lot of different people that, some that have done research, that were willing to open up to researchers and see what they can do to help, by telling their story. And I've got people that, everybody has this perception of Black Lives Matter, that they're out to destroy your cities when they come in, and that's what the right wants a lot of people to believe. And actually, my friend here in town, he's the president of the Black Lives Matter movement in the Flint area, and he's shown on many occasions in their marches, he'll go off to the side of the road, and somebody may be holding a sign that says, something just disgusting on it, but he'll go up and he'll shake their hand and he'll talk to them. And it's crazy to see the
Great.
amount of people that are willing to do that,
Hmm.
knowing that he's down here marching right now in their city, but they're willing to conversate and have, some type of peaceful dialogue. And so, but yeah, I'm always open for that. I mean, obviously, whatever days I have to make sure that it lines up
Mhm.
with our schedule
Sure.
and other events that are going on. But like I said, it's not about the money to me. It's about just getting the right things done and helping society to heal. That's one of our biggest problems in the United States is that we've had so much violence for so many years since the beginning of the Declaration of Independence and before that we've never really taken the time to just slow down and heal, and figure out why it is that we've ever felt the way we do today. So yeah, I'm definitely open to jumping in some of the circles and seeing what I can do to help you out in your organization.
Great. Yeah, we'll look forward to that. We'll just hold some empathy circles, bring some different sides together, and actually do the practice. And I
Yeah.
find that it also having some high profile people, like I did an empathy circle. I don't know if you know Joey Gibson in
Mhm.
are you familiar with him? He's in the Portland area. He's sort of been a leader on the right
Right. Is he
there.
with Proud Boys?
Uh, he's overlapped with, I don't know if he's a Proud
Right.
Boy per se, but he has a lot of Proud Boys who've been in his rallies
Okay.
and stuff. So anyway, so he actually did an empathy circle with when they came after Charlottesville. They came down to they had a free speech rally that they were going to hold in San Francisco, and all of San Francisco was in a total uproar because it was just after Charlottesville. And I
Right.
invited him to take part in an empathy circle. He said, sure. And then I got one of the counter demonstrators,
Mm.
organizers, and we actually have an online empathy circle with them. And if you can bring the leaders together and
Yeah.
show constructive dialogue, it sort of models it for for others.
Mhm.
And the practice is such that if you see it done, you sort of learn the practice by observation instead of like a lot of
Yeah.
didactic learning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, definitely. That's I with that, even with our work, we want to change the leaders. We want to be able to get in there and make that change. A lot of times it's the ranking file members that we end up pulling out. But when we can pull a leader, for instance, the story of Jeff Scoop, I don't know if you're familiar with his area or his
no.
story. He was the leader of the National Socialist Movement, which is the largest Nazi movement in the United States, or was. I don't know if its membership has broken up significantly. Jesse Morton actually helped with that. They were basically able to put a so Jeff Scoop left the hate movement after Charlottesville. We were able to kind of get in there and start doing some of the work on him and transitioning and healing, and we heal every single day. We're still going through that process, but by doing that we implemented put a black person in leadership. And you had all these rank and file members in National Socialist movement must be a Nazi movement. They're like, going, what? Wait, what is going on here? And so then people started to question, that reality. I'm like, why am I here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And it was really easy to pull a lot of those people out, especially once we had a leader
Mm.
that had been their leader for over 20 years almost. Um, Turn away from racism. Now he's got his own organization. You can look it up called Beyond Barriers, where he does a lot of different work and he'll talk to formers, and just have conversations about life and where they are now and what the kind of work they're doing to make changes in their community. So he would be a really good person to probably
Mm.
get in the empathy circle. I know um, there's people on the left and the right though that don't agree with him,
Hmm.
but me and Daryl get the same thing. Daryl has been attacked by members of Black Lives Matter that he's sympathetic of their causes, and it's not at all. He's not sympathetic at all. He just wants to know how, like he says all the time, how can somebody hate me if they don't know who I am. And so that's been his. He like he said, he never went into this to try to change people. He just went in to try to figure things out, and learn. And once he started to see change happen, he knew that that was something he had to do. So
Yeah, I saw that in his documentary where he was sitting down with Black Lives Matter. It got kind of testy there. I thought they
yeah,
need an empathy
and I
circle.
know and I know him too. I know the guy that he
Mm,
was speaking to
mm,
actually, and it's crazy is because he in that clip, they're so at each other. And it took some time for Hank Newsom to like really start getting that empathetic side of it. And Hank actually was and I don't remember if this was in New York or if it was in DC, but there was a huge alt-right, Unite the Right type rally that was going on. And he showed up with about 16 to 17 Black Lives Matter members. And they literally got invited up onto the stage.
Oh, I saw that.
And
Yeah.
at the end of this, like there was bikers and people on the right that were hugging his kids. And it's just a really good thing to see that, like, watch that clip with him and Daryl at one point in time in their lives, and then
Hmm.
see, how much we can learn and how much we grow with the training and things that we do, and how that empathy changed people's hearts, at a Unite the Right rally. And they realized that it's those things that we have in common, and that love, that when we just open our hearts up to somebody else, it's melting, in a good way.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, well, that's great. So maybe a good time to end. We'll
yeah,
follow up by email. Thanks so much, Ryan, for
yeah,
the
definitely.
dialogue. Is there any websites, any resources to
Yeah, if you
check out?
want to check my website out, it's www.ryan4change. That's the number four, change.com. You can read about my story on there, get to know a little bit about my transformation and the process that it took. I also have some different media things on work that I've done around the country and work that I'm doing now, and ways for you to reach out to me if you want to have a conversation. If maybe somebody's listening to this, or later on you meet them and they're part of a group that they're just thinking about getting out, they can write me and email me at any time too. My email is the same as my website. It's ryanforchange@gmail.com. So that's the number four. So yeah.
Mhm. All the
Um,
links will be down in the
okay.
description
Yeah,
area
look me
too.
up, look
Mhm.
Daryl up and the work that he does, look up Light Upon Light and Jesse Morton and the work that they do, Beyond Barriers. There's, very few organizations, but we are there, and so the work that they're doing is very, very important. And so any type of support, even if it's not financially, just go there and see the work they're doing. And we're not saying be sympathetic with everybody, just be empathetic and understanding enough to see it.
Be empathetic. We listen.
Right, right. So I
I
appreciate you having me on. Definitely. I love this.
really appreciate it too.